Let's talk poppy centers today.
We think about poppy centers as bulbous or circular, like the center in the foreground, but in fact, centers in the flower look like the center that I've just circled. Poppy centers are oval or oblong, and they have a flat top. And as you see here in this oriental poppy, the top has ridges. The ridges look different on different kinds of poppies. The Shirley poppies have small centers, and the Oriental and Icelandic poppies have much larger centers. Generally, only the top of the poppy center is visible. Let's look at the poppy centers on this poppy that I made. This is a large center, and here's another flower that's actually the same size, and it's got a small center. You should think about which one you like. At this point, I'd like you to make 2 centers only, one small and one large. Later, you can go back and make more centers of the kind that you prefer, or make a mix. At this point, just make one large and one small center while you're learning. The measurements will be on the screen, but the large center is 1.5 inches long and the small one 1 inch. Let's start with the first step, making the hook. All you need to do is put a bend in your wire, but because number 16 gauge stem wires are stiff, this can be a little bit of a struggle. You, of course, may use pliers to assist yourself with this task. The placement of your thumb determines the length of the wire that you are bending. So for the large center, put your thumb about 1 inch down the wire and then bend. And for the small center, put your thumb a little higher. The next step is covering the hook. You're going to be covering the hook with 2 layers. The first layer is with aluminum foil. You're going to take a rectangle of foil and fold it back on itself 2 or 3 times. One section of the aluminum foil will just be 1 layer. The other section of the foil will have several layers that are folded in on each other. Put a little bit of the wire through the hook and then wrap. As you're wrapping, keep the section of the foil that has multiple layers toward the top. This will bulk up the top of the center so that it has that oblong shape. Remember, keep the top of the center a bit flat and measure it. Your large center should be about 1 inch long at this point, maybe a bit longer than 1 inch. The other layers that will go on the center are going to bulk it up further, so you don't need to aim for full size at this point. Okay, now I'm ready to do the smaller center, and I'm wrapping this one, but as you'll see, I don't like how I've wrapped it, and I can just unwrap it and rewrap it until I'm satisfied. In this case, I have too much foil on part of it, so I'm going to like the center better when I take that extra bit of foil off. So the small center should be narrower. When I look at it with a ruler, I'm happy with the results that I've achieved. When I'm making centers on my own, though, I do not use rulers. I just eyeball the size of the center. And I think about large centers as being thumb size and small centers being kind of pinky size. The next layer has a soft cloth-like feel. Here I've got a wipe that I used for a craft project. It is clean. I just used it to clean my fingers or wipe up glue or something, and it's dry. I folded it up 3 times, and then I did 2 cuts, and then I had a bunch of pieces. I'm laying down some lines of glue onto the pieces, a couple lines on bigger pieces and 1 line on smaller. And then I spread the glue out with my scraper. And I'll let it sit for a moment. And then I can start wrapping up my center. So I got to make sure that I get some covering over the top. And by the way, you don't have to use wipes here. You can absolutely use paper towel, one that you've used and dried out, or one that's new, either way. And so as you see here, I'm just putting a wrapping cover on. It doesn't have to be thick. I think I only used two strips rather, of the wipe that was gluey on this particular center. So you don't need to add too much bulk because there's even going to be one more layer here. So now I'm working on the smaller center, and that wraps up very quickly. I did decide I wanted one more layer. By the way, I had a little bit of trouble when using this particular wipe. I'm not sure why, but this brand of wipe is more difficult to work with. Now we're going to add the ridges, and this is really fun because we are going to make some string out of this wipe here. So I'm going to cut it into 4 pieces. First, it's a full wipe, and the string needs to be made out of strips that are about a little less than 1/2 inch by about 3 inches. And so here you can see I'm cutting those off that square. And I'm going to need 4 strips for the large center and 3 strips for the small center. I'm going to put a line of glue on each of the strips, which I spread with my scraper. This is going to start to be a gluey mess. And yes, you can wipe off your fingers at any point. But the fun part is you get to make string. So you take a gluey strip and you're going to twist each end in opposite directions, and you'll find that you end up with string that you can use to make the ridges. So do you see the ridges on top of that center? The large centers get 4 strips arranged in a star-like pattern that consists of 2 X's. So you make an X, and then you fill in the spaces with another X. So you'll have 4 strings that overlap. And for the small center, you're going to make a star shape that has 3 lines that intersect in the middle in the shape of a star. And here you can see what that looks like on the finished smaller center. Get started by putting some glue on top of the center. You'll just put some dots of glue on and smear them with your finger. It doesn't need to be too much glue. And then you wrap the string around the top of the center in that star-shaped pattern. And you will have to hold the bits of string on, and you can do that with your hand that is holding the base of the poppy center. So one hand will wrap the string around, and the other hand will pinch the strings tightly to the base and hold them in place. And since you're new at making centers, give it a measure afterwards just to see how it's going. Make sure you're bulking up. And this is how I'll do the small one. Again, I'll hold the string in place with one hand at the base, and then I'll wrap it around with the other hand. And if you don't like the placement of your strings, you can adjust them, and that's no problem. And you're done. You'll leave these aside to dry. 2 things are special about making centers like this. The first thing is that you are not using any foam products or hot glue, which can be harmful for the environment. The second thing is that you're really doing sculpture, which is what paper flowers are. Good centers give our flowers an amazing shape, and we're all set to make gorgeous poppies.